Hi, I'm Richard Dana, and I recently rented the movie Harriet from the Kingsville Public Library, trying out their new curbside service. You call 440-224-0239. You let the staff of the library know the resources you would like to borrow, in my case, a movie, and the staff will utilize approved standards to safely bring these materials to you in the comfort of your vehicle. All you have to do is park your car at the Kingsville Public Library, give them a call, and tell them of your arrival, and they'll bring the materials that you've requested to you. Our libraries are at the very heart of our communities. While I'm a frequent visitor to the Ashtabula County District Library System, the Geauga County Public Library System, the Conneaut Public Library, Henderson Memorial, and Harbor Topkey, I needed to obtain a Kingsville library card. And here it is, and you see how it says about how they are the heart of their community, and that's very true. And so I want to give my thanks to Tim for setting this up online, and to AJ, who wondered if I might do a review of the movie that I was renting here, called Harriet. AJ wanted to know if the real actions of the Underground Railroad, from my experience on the board of the Hubbard House Underground Railroad Museum, bore any resemblance to what was depicted in the film. Before I start with my movie review, I want to give a shout out to Kate Larson and her excellent book entitled Bound for the Promised Land, Harriet Tubman, Portrait of an American Hero. This book is well researched and well sourced and portrays an accurate account of Harriet's life, with this caveat. As historians, we are always on the lookout for new information, new primary source materials that may change how we look at history or expand the story that we know. The movie Harriet stars Cynthia Erivo. She does a fabulous job in her role as Harriet, and has an amazing singing voice that she utilizes to sing hymns and other songs that were utilized by actual freedom seekers as they followed the drinking gourd, the North Star to freedom. There are many things that are factual in the film about Harriet's life. The movie has many scenes of Harriet suffering from seizures, which she believed were religious visions. The cause of these seizures were more likely caused from an injury she sustained from weights that were literally thrown at her, probably intended to harm another slave, but that struck Harriet in the forehead. Harriet sustained other beatings, but the movie does not make the personal abuse that Harriet suffered a major emphasis of this film. Rather, I think the movie does a nice job of conveying the mental abuse of slavery. Harriet's father was given his freedom, and hence Harriet and her siblings should have been equally free. The legal realities, however, did not comport to Harriet's having actual freedom, Harriet or her siblings. Despite being legally free, the plantation owners sold Harriet's sisters to pay bills, with Harriet herself threatened with facing the auction block. This breakup of the family is one of the more heart-wrenching parts of this movie, historically accurate, with children literally being ripped away from their mother's arms. Factually, Harriet, who was called Minty, decided to run away, but this was not a singular decision among her family. Initially, she was going to leave along with her brothers, Harry and Ben. I'm going to put on the screen an actual copy of the newspaper ad seeking their recapture. In this ad, this caused Harry and Ben to return to the plantation, with Harriet pressing forward alone. The movie doesn't make this distinction quite as good as real life. One of the most dramatic parts of the movie is when Harriet first crosses over into the state of Pennsylvania. True to the facts, the movie has Harriet looking at her hands to see if her body had somehow physically transformed. The movie has her continuing on to Philadelphia and introduces us to the second most important role in this film, William Still, expertly played by Leslie Odom Jr. William Still is not as well known as he should be, but this free man of color was called the father of the Underground Railroad. He lived in Philadelphia and was a leading member of the Philadelphia and the Pennsylvania Anti-Slavery Society. What made William Still unique from his other Underground Railroad agents was his recognition of the psychological toll of slavery and the need to record information about each person who he helped to freedom. For good reason, practically every other agent of the Underground Railroad did not keep these records. For instance, at the Hubbard House, we do not have a listing of each one of the persons that the Hubbard House or the Hubbard family helped, which is estimated conservatively to be about 400 freedom seekers. And the reason that they didn't write this down is that they didn't want the government to then later seize these writings that would then provide proof of their guilt of violating various laws, including the federal fugitive slave law. In 1793, when our country was first starting as a nation, there was the initial Federal Fugitive Slave Act that provided for $1,000 in fines for each person that you helped along the road to freedom. And that law was then enhanced in 1850, from which to allow for 6 months in jail and $1,000 in fines. So if you take the Hubbard family, they were facing a couple hundred years in prison plus $400,000 in fines at a time frame when that was a lot of money, still is now. However, Still didn't do that, Still kept records of everyone that he helped because he understood the calamity that slavery was causing to African Americans in the breakup of the family. So Still recorded injuries that freedom seekers sustained, the plantations where they escaped, and the names of family members, including the names of family members that may have been sold down the river. While William Still recognized that when slavery ended, the lack of records would impede families from being able to reunite with one another. Some of the best stories we have about the Underground Railroad are told by William Still that survive today, and I will show a listing of his work that you can find for free online or at your local library. The truth of the story of Harriet's and William's role on the Underground Railroad is a story worth telling and compelling enough without embellishment. However, the end of the movie gets a bit theatrical, with Harriet portrayed as a gun-toting heroine, impeccably dressed and eager to shoot her way out of any trouble. William Still recalls Harriet Tubman as a shrewd and fearless agent of the Underground Railroad, but not one who was going to draw unnecessary attention to herself during these risky operations. Leading freedom seekers from the Maryland shore to Philadelphia, approximately 100 miles, and taking upwards of 2 weeks in all kinds of weather, was difficult enough. William Still describes Harriet Tubman coming to Philadelphia with freedom seekers suffering the ill effects of frostbite, and Harriet herself literally wearing her shoes off of her feet. The movie quotes Harriet as saying that she was going to be free or die. But however, described as the Moses of her people, William Still quoted Harriet as saying they had to go or die. During her frequent trips back to the Maryland shore, she would not allow anyone in her company to complain about conditions or talk of going back. In her own words, Harriet said, "Time was very critical, and therefore no foolishness would be indulged in on the road." Good movie, enjoyable. Could have been more factual, but there are some powerful scenes that do the overall story justice. I'll offer you some final thoughts here, and that's about us uniquely here in Northeast Ohio. We have an equally compelling story to tell about the history of the Underground Railroad. When the state of Maryland first decided to embrace its history 20 years ago, at that time they did much of what we are currently doing in Ohio, and that's the placement of various historical markers. Here is a picture for a marker that was placed for Harriet Tubman several years ago in the state of Maryland. Not much to look at and not much in the way of information. Here is another marker for Frederick Douglass, and unfortunately the state of Maryland has not yet to fully tell his story. That will be upcoming. But however, at least for Harriet, A group of citizens, historians, and various public and private partnerships, they came together to build this, the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad Historical Park. From this location, tourists from all over the country come to learn about Harriet and start driving tours throughout Dorchester County and the Maryland shore. In this picture, along with myself, Kate, the author of the book that I've suggested, that's worthy if you want to learn more about Harriet. We also have pictured Catherine Delavan, who's an Underground Railroad and women's suffrage expert from Lake Erie College. But we also have depicted here Marcy Ross, who came up with the initial vision for the Harriet Tubman Center that took 20 years of her career to make into a reality. This could occur in Northeast Ohio. That includes critical and well-documented stops on the Underground Railroad and women's suffrage, all near the Lake Erie shore. Already, we have tour bus companies that stop at the Freedom Center in Cincinnati and then drive to Seneca Falls, right through I-90 and Northeast Ohio. We have an opportunity to tell the story of the Underground Railroad and women's suffrage right here in our own backyard. But our story is different, and that is a unique story of cooperation that occurred from humble men and women of all races who came together to make America's ideas apply to even more Americans. Thank you for the opportunity to listen to my review, and give AJ a call. Let her know what you think of this review, and if you'd like to see some additional information about the story here of Northeast Ohio, and perhaps we can use this as a forum here for you to tell your family's story or your story about how Northeast Ohio has helped to lead the nation in securing equal rights for all of our citizens. Thank you very much.